And then you're going to pull up our slide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So thanks for joining us today. And thank you, Valerie, for putting this together last minute yesterday. We've had a lot of calls from clients and a lot of the same questions, so we thought it made a lot of sense to get on a Zoom conference and walk through a lot of those questions together. So if you haven't met us before, we're dental accounting pros in Benton Bray, and sitting with us is Tyler Jones with Helsel Fetterman as a guest speaker. So there's Brian Bray and Marina Lesselman, and myself, I'm Kevin Bray, and Brian is going to be leading the conversation today. So,
yeah, these are interesting times to say the least. We've never seen anything like this, and it certainly is causing financial stress on dental offices for sure. You need to leave the chat box open, but we've been in contact with a lot of our partners just to gather information on what's going on. We've talked to the dental bankers, and they're all working on some sort of kind of lifeline, some kind of relief programs, whether it's deferred payments or no interest only or emergency lines of credit. So, that's good to hear. We brought Tyler in. He's done a deep dive on the I call it the Emergency Family Leave Act that's going on the federal level. And things have been moving pretty quickly here in Washington State as well. We have basically emergency rules have been passed with regard to unemployment benefits for temporarily laid off workers. So that's primary purpose today is to try and just disseminate as much of this new information out there as possible. Because we know we have the ADA who's recommended 3-week closure for offices, except for essential or emergency care. I believe California has done the same thing, as well as Oregon. I do not believe, at least as of this morning, the Washington State Dental Association had not recommended a closure of offices except for emergency care. Tyler, are you aware of anything?
As of last night, the ADA and CDA had put prohibition on, not a prohibition, but recommended stop practicing any elective dentistry and only treating if it's for the relief of pain or if it's going to significantly impact the patient's health.
So, you got the dial-on box open? So, just to kind of tee this up, everything's been moving quickly. Literally in the last probably 3 days, 4 days, we've done a deep dive on all these new rules. The big one, obviously, for dental offices is this temporary layoff. The state of Washington, through Employment Security, has 2 programs. They have a reduced hours program or a shared work program or a temporary layoff program. Next. So what benefits are available to employees? I think we're going to see a lot of offices opt for the temporary layoff for a number of reasons that will probably come out in our discussion. During a temporary layoff, employees can get up to 8 weeks of unemployment benefits and will not be required to jump through the hoops of looking for work. They will be available to come in for emergency care, and it will not interrupt those unemployment benefits, although it may reduce them, reduce the calculation of those benefits for the amount of their actual paychecks. Paying taxes on a federal level for your income taxes. We've been, watching for developments. President Trump has asked for an extension of filing tax returns. Congress has asked for an extension. The head of Treasury has indicated that there should be an extension for filing and paying taxes. What came out literally, hour and a half, 2 hours ago, head of Treasury in a White House press conference indicated that there would not be an extension of filing returns, but there would be a 90-day extension of paying your income taxes owed without interest or penalties. So that's the latest there. And there is potential relief with Department of Revenue for late filed and late paid B&O excise taxes.
So Brian, there's a question from your audience. It says, can you repeat what you said about unemployment and if we pay out PTO later after they have applied for unemployment?
Okay. So just so I understand the question, I'll say it back to you. The question being, can they pay out PTO or accrued sick leave at the same time they're applying for unemployment? Is that the question?
This is coming from Dr. Servant. People are asking, what is PTO? So if you could explain what PTO is. And the question from Dr. Oba was, can you repeat what you said about unemployment? And if we pay out PTO later after they have applied for unemployment, correct? Question mark.
Okay. Question. So offices are allowed to pay out their PTO or hold their PTO. PTO is paid time off. Just think of it as a bucket of time available for vacation or sick leave. Where's the chat? And sorry, Val, we're trying to get to the chat box so we can actually see the questions coming in.
Great, thank you. Yeah, because they are starting to come in. When you say temporarily unemployment, are you referring to standby? And
yes,
they can reduce hours even if they're on standby, question mark.
Oh, okay. So this is Tyler. So if I understand the question PTO is governed under Washington law, except for in the city of Seattle. Most PTO is governed by contract. So if you have an employee manual, the first question you need to do is when you ask about PTO is go to your employee manual and or contact your HR provider to see what your PTO obligations are. So if you use paychecks or ADR for your payroll processing, they probably gave you an employee manual. Then that'll govern if your PTO needs to be paid out at the time you terminate, lay someone off. 90% of the time, the PTO does need to be paid out when you terminate or lay someone off. But PTO should be distinguished between sick pay. If you offer any sick pay, that's a different question. If I'm understanding the question correctly, though, is when you lay someone off, they're no longer employed for you. And so if they go, and you should encourage your employees to go seek unemployment, to file for unemployment. About 14 days later, you'll get a letter in the mail asking to understand what the unemployment, the terms of that separation are. And at that point, you'll check it was a standby layoff or a temporary layoff. And that can last for up to 8 weeks where they'll be able to draw their unemployment. Historically, I don't know what it's like right now because I'm sure it's getting crazy at the ESD office. Historically, employees have been able to draw on unemployment while this letter is going out to the former employer for processing. Hopefully that's still the case. We haven't seen any meaningful guidance on that. But PTO and sick pay should be separated. PTO is a vacation type benefit, whereas sick pay is something that you may offer, but most smaller practices don't.
Some of the other questions coming in, when they apply for standby unemployment, can they still work reduced hours? My understanding is that's going to impact their unemployment claim.
Yes, the purpose of standby is that one of the requirements of standby is they have to be available for any hours offered by the employer. So if you have an emergency case and need to have some staff come in to deal with that emergency case, or if you want your admin person to be available to run the phones and deal with reappointments and so forth, that pay will impact the amount of their employment benefits, but they are allowed to work.
Will employees lose their health care coverage if they receive it from the office and you put them on standby?
Yeah.
You still have to pay premiums.
Go ahead.
Employers are encouraged to continue to pay the healthcare premiums for their employees while they're on standby. And that way, the employees continue with their benefits while they're on standby. If they permanently separate, the employees will have an option to go on COBRA just like usual.
I think we're getting a lot of questions where people just want us to kind of run through the seminar and maybe tick off what we have on our list, and then we do the Q&A at the end. So maybe we jump back in.
Well, it's really kind of free form. I mean, the general guidelines are is that we're going to see a lot of offices temporarily close, and under that scenario, employees will qualify for unemployment benefits and be able to work as needed on a request of the employer. I did see a question there. Will this unemployment benefits be charged against their experience rating? The answer to that is yes. So do we need to pay out PTO if we stand by or lay them off?
Let's jump back into the taxes and managing cash flow piece, because central banks and all that understand what's going on. Can you touch on that?
Okay, managing cash flow is going to be, we anticipate there's going to be a financial stress certainly in a lot of practice.
Someone could turn off, I think someone doesn't have their speaker on mute, so someone could turn it off.
I can't adjust the volume on it.
Yeah, I'll handle that on my end. Please, a reminder, everyone, please don't unmute yourself until the presenters get through this, please.
We good? Yeah. Okay. So managing cash flow, offices, we expect a number of offices to go through financial stresses. And like I said earlier, we've reached out to the dental banks, Bank of America Practice Solutions, Columbia, First Citizens, and every one of them have indicated they've been dealing with this as we have. They're just swamped with calls and inquiries as to what's going to be available at the bank level for emergency lines of credit, payment deferrals on, their term loans and so forth. And the banks are quite open-minded in that regard. Had a conversation with a couple of them, and the Bank of America Practice Solutions is kind of opening their arms, so to say, and put it out there. They're going to take care of their customers. And Columbia is doing the same thing. I mean, well, all of them for that matter.
Yeah.
I've got emails from all of them basically expressing that they're going to help their clients muscle through this financial stresses that they may incur.
Yeah, I've been talking to a number of banks as clients have called me, and I've yet to have a total shutdown from any of the dental specific lenders. Particularly Bank of America has been really generous. So is Columbia. Lindever is out there, KidSap, all of them have been really good. So the first thing you do to manage cash flow is reach out to your bank and see what they can do for you for any kind of a loan deferral, interest only. Some of them are taking a few months and then backing it out at the end of your term to get through. So banks would be the first one. The other one that I've had success with is go look at your leases and see if you have what's called a force majeure clause. It's force and then the word is M-A-J-E-U-R-E at the end of your lease. Oftentimes that's a clause that says for acts of God, the parties agree to negotiate in good faith for the deferral of rent payments while we work through these difficult times. Historically, they've been used for times of war, but oftentimes they'll, I'm seeing a lot of landlords honoring those force majeure clause right now. Someone's asking how to spell it. I'll spell it for you later, but it's force, F-O-R-C-E, and then space majeure, M-A-G-A-E-U-R-E. Those are often in leases and can be an avenue. Even if you don't have that in your lease, I would say probably about half of them do. Contact your attorney and just have them flip through your lease to see if they can reach out to your landlord to discuss either rent abatement, rent deferral, or some kind of workout with your landlord during this difficult time. Other than your employees, your rent for your practice is probably your most expensive ticket item.
Absolutely.
The other thing is oftentimes check with some of your, if you're doing a lease with, or if you're leasing some equipment like your Seric machine from Patterson, Burkhardt, or Henry Schein, go to the back of that, see if it has a force majeure clause, so that you can leverage that. Don't just immediately call your landlord and ask for rent. Flip through your lease. Oftentimes, there's a clause that says if a tenant ever admits that it's insolvent, that's technically a default under the lease. So you want to be kind of tactful in how you approach the landlord. But I've had a lot of success this week. Been working long days, working with landlords on workout on leases. So check for that clause, read it, see what it says, and if you feel comfortable, reach out to your landlord. And after your practice loan, you've checked off your lease loan or your lease payment to kind of stretch cash flow during this time.
All good ideas. So I did see a question up there about the House Senate Bill 6201, which is basically an emergency expansion of the Family Leave Act. Tyler's done a semi-deep dive on that. Maybe you could share your thoughts on that.
I think the first thing I would say about the new bill is that it hasn't been passed by the Senate yet, and I would expect it to change a little bit. The other part of it that should be kept in mind is that there's an exception at the end of the bill that says the Department of Labor can issue regulations that specifically apply to the healthcare industry or to employers of less than 50 employees. I suspect those regulations are coming, so to the extent those lay on top of the bill and supersede what it says, especially as it relates to dental practices, I suspect it will. So a lot of what we're talking about is kind of academic until the Secretary releases those regulations. At a high level, I would remind people, because I think this is where a lot of confusion is shutting down your practice, terminating employees, or laying them off on standby are mutually exclusive from FMLA. So FMLA applies if the business is operational, the person is still an employee of your business and working for you. FMLA follows their employment. So if you lay someone off, FMLA no longer applies. So that's the big thing to think about. What the bill itself says is that it's expansion on two prongs. Essentially, at a high level, what it does is it provides up to 12 weeks of employer-provided assistance to employees who are actively dealing with COVID. So what that means for you is if you lay someone off, it doesn't apply because you've laid them off or you've terminated employment. It only applies if someone has one of the 4 requirements that they're actively dealing with coronavirus. So think about it that way. So if someone doesn't have someone in their life who's been diagnosed, exposed, or is quarantining, FMLA doesn't apply. Here in Washington, we have a big catch-all though, because a lot of your staff deal with school, have families, and the students are out of school. That will probably make FMLA apply to most practice owners. But again, if the practice is closed, no longer operational, or you've laid people off, FMLA at this time shouldn't be the bigger concern for you.
So in plain English, if you close your office for 2 or 3 weeks, it puts a pause on FMLA kicking in.
If you've laid the employees off.
Laid the employees off, right.
But if you want to keep the office going, keep them on your payroll, or maybe you have 1 day a week you're open and you are not willing to lay people off, FMLA becomes an issue. Likewise, if 3 or 4 months down the road, someone comes into your office and you haven't laid them off and they say, hey, I have coronavirus, then FMLA becomes an issue. But again, I would say that FMLA follows their employment.
There's a question up here about paying out PTO prior to laying off, and even, I think we talked about this yesterday, accruing a negative PTO balance. You want to touch on that?
Sure. I just want to piggyback on what Tyler was talking about, what's referred to as HR 6201 or the FMLA tentative amendment. It's only passed the House, and we've been speculating here internally that it's been held up in the Senate versus just, pushing hard through the Senate and laying on the president's desk for signature, is because of the issues surrounding kind of the impact on small business owners, the under 50 employer size shops. FMLA typically is not applied to, small business owners in the past. And if it did kick in, if there's, 0 to 50 employees in particular, that could be a hell of a financial burden for small business owners to carry. And it could potentially put their business at risk. Keep in mind, it has not passed the Senate, it's not law, so it's just speculation at this point. Question regarding PTO. Paying out PTO before, did you say before applying for unemployment?
Yeah, because that question came up yesterday. My staff has PTO balances and they're asking if, we should pay that out and then get laid off, or,
You
go
could
take that route.
do that, absolutely.
Yeah, because
It follows the manual, right?
yeah, you want to touch on that?
So I think Dr. Guak is asking the question, if I know I'm going to lay someone off, put them on layoff via standby with Washington State purposes, do I have to pay out their PTO? The question is every practice has a different definition of PTO. So you have to talk to your HR person or see your employee manual to see what the definition of PTO is. Most practices have PTO as an accrued benefit, meaning that if you fire them for some reason or you decided to part ways, then you would have to pay out that PTO. That's the same case here. So if you lay someone off, you are essentially parting ways with them. So if it's vacation or paid time off, you most likely, after you consult your manual, will find that you need to pay that out. That's different than sick pay if you offer that. So I think hopefully that answers your question. PTO is governed by contract, by what you have in place for the employees of your practice.
But couldn't the employer and the employees agree to do something other than what their manual states?
They could agree in writing if they want to do something else with their manual. I have a couple practices where the employers are saying, hey, I'm going to front you some paid time off if you want to take it now, and we'll do a promissory note back to me for future years. So if you want another 2 weeks of paid time off, I can help you with that now, and you can just earn it out when the trains are running back on time.
So I guess another version of the question would be is if my employees have, say, across the board a week of accrued PTO, or a combination, a week of accrued PTO and sick leave, and they want to use that, and then the following week go on unemployment. Because unemployment benefits are going to be less than, an employee's normal paycheck, their normal pay rate. So they certainly could do that.
They could do that. That's absolutely an option if they want to do that. I guess my question would be what's the cash difference to the employee to that? They get their cash all at once and then start their unemployment versus they get their cash all at once, burn a couple weeks, and then start their unemployment. It's all net is the same.
Sure.
But I totally agree with you in terms of if you're looking for flexibility and how you handle this before you pull the layoff button.
So probably from an economic point of view would be the biggest bang for the buck for the employees is to just cash them out.
Yeah.
And then go apply for unemployment.
And then the term standby, it's not something I'm making up. So when you lay someone off, you're going to get a letter from the Employment Security Department, and you'll check a box saying what was the reason for this separation, and you'll check the standby layoff, and that gives them up to 8 weeks of flex, where you can bring them back in and all that stuff.
Kirk has a good question here. What about an employee who doesn't want to use their PTO and want to save it for the fall or winter, but want to do unemployment?
They don't have to use their PTO. I mean, they can preserve it.
if they claim unemployment and get formally laid off?
Yeah, they don't have to use their PTO.
Okay.
They can go straight to unemployment.
So I guess it's a case by case, and like we touched on, the unemployment, money they get from unemployment is gonna be less than their salary, so they would just have to, I guess, do a quick cash flow analysis of their household expenses and then, work that out with you.
So we've had a couple questions along those lines that got emailed to us in advance here. I think we touched on this earlier, is if you're on standby unemployment, if you put your crew on standby unemployment, you have employees that come in and work for a few hours or a day for whatever, an emergency case or covering phones. They have to report that to Employment Security, and it factors into the amount of their unemployment benefits. Another question regarding if your office puts your employees on standby, across the board layoff, and those employees work for other employers, the income they work from those other employers will impact or reduce the amount of their unemployment benefits.
Right, and I'm seeing a lot of questions, and so just to be clear, is you can't force employees to take their PTO and their vacation time. Your employee manual or your HR policies may dictate that when someone separates from service, you have to pay them out. Standby is considered a layoff, so you may have to pay them out depending on what your employee manual says. But in the absence of that, if they want to keep their sick pay and use it later down the road for a future date, that's fine. You are not required to approve their PTO request during this time, though if you are going to separate from service via a layoff, a standby layoff, I think they're kind of mutually exclusive. You're going to have to possibly pay out the PTO, depending on your HR policy.
So lots of questions about what do employees do until they actually get an unemployment check.
We're expecting guidance from the Employment Security Department shortly about what resources they're going to put in place to exercise that or to increase their response to that. It's the government, so it's always wishful thinking that they'll be fast. But as of right now, employees do get their unemployment benefits while their claim is processing. And I've seen employees get benefits already from layoffs that started last week, so.
Any type of waiting periods have been waived. So any mandatory waiting periods that typically apply to unemployment benefits have been waived. It's just a matter of how fast they can process it.
And you, the employers, you're not, you can tell them, file for unemployment. You're encouraged for doing that.
Question, many offices do not have employee handbooks. How does this affect the doctor?
It depends on what your historic PTO practices have been. If if it's something they accrue based off anniversaries, or they just get to bank a certain amount every year, and it's an accrued benefit, then it's something they're entitled to, whether it's written down or not.
Okay, there's a question, are owners of S corps eligible for unemployment? That depends on whether or not you've opted unemployment coverage. Because corporate officers have the option of opting out of the unemployment system.
Most people who make their entities and make an S election have opted out, in my experience.
Yes. But the pay is the federal program.
Yeah, you're paying into the federal
So
program.
how did that? They're just out.
They're just out.
Yeah.
Standby is considered a layoff. It's a type of layoff. So the difference between terminating someone and laying someone off is that layoffs come with a set of rules about how you're allowed to rehire for that position. Usually the laid off employee, barring something exceptional, has like a first right of refusal to that position if you ever decide to rehire for it. But standby is not something we're just making up. It's a type of layoff.
So there's a question there, what if they apply for unemployment and then a week later ask for their PTO? In other words, they need the financial resource to get through this.
It shouldn't be an issue for their unemployment. It's something they were entitled to as a matter of contract, and they're still unemployed.
In other words, it was deemed earned prior to the layoff, so it won't factor into the calculation of benefits. Correct?
Correct.
I don't pay into the state unemployment, but do I have to pay into the federal? Yeah, it looks like a question from an owner. Yeah, if an owner isn't covered under the state unemployment program, you're out completely.
Correct. And so layoff doesn't require a payout of PPO as it's not a separation. It doesn't require it unless your contract or your employee manual says it does in most cases. You need to consult your HR team or whoever's handling your paychecks to figure out how you handled your PTO. It's different for every practice.
Question about an associate.
Separation.
Say what? Associate paid on a production basis. Is that associate eligible for unemployment? If they're paid as a W-2 employee, absolutely.
So let's see.
So it sounds FMLA is ideal for a situation where you don't want to deal with PTO stamp.
No, only people are actually sick, or
Yeah,
they're taking care of a sick family member, or staying home with the child whose school is on temporary closure.
That's what I agree. That's what I was saying. FMLA is not a substitution for unemployment. It's a certain set of benefits that accrue when someone is directly in, under the current law, when they have something that qualifies for FMLA, and assuming this new bill is passed, they would have to meet the requirements for FMLA under the new bill.
Let's see, what if you pay a stipend now to help employees and then the Senate changes laws, and that money you pay doesn't qualify for the tax credit? Well, we're talking about two different things. If you want to pay a stipend to your employees to help them financially get through this, I recommend you do so as a payroll advance, and not something that actually runs through payroll for services for hours worked, because if it runs through payroll, it's going to factor into their unemployment benefits. At a later date, after this mess kind of passes and everything gets back to normal, at that time, if you choose to bonus that payroll advance to your employees, you're free to do so at that time.
Correct. It will, and then a claim will impact, technically it would impact your experience rating. However, I am quite confident, though never certain, that we're going to see some legislative grace come our way, and they're going to say that layoffs that occur during this period of time are not going to impact your experience rating.
But it's the government, Tyler.
Yeah, I know, but they've been as responsive as they can be so far. So I would be hopeful that that's coming, but by the letter of the law, it's just like if it happened 2 years ago.
But I will tell you, been around the block a few times and a bit cynical when it comes to the government taxing agencies, is the employment security has been swamped since the first of the year with the state level Family Medical Leave Act. The state got 3 times the number of applicants than they were forecasting. So they had 30,000 applicants versus 10,000. And now this hits. I fully imagine, just to keep the system financially viable, we're all going to find ourselves, we're going to find ourselves paying through probably higher, the employment security tax rates, in future years.
The state unemployment boards?
Yeah,
There is a federal grant that is scheduled to
ease
supplement
yeah.
the ease the pay, and so maybe they're not going to be as bad off as Brian's suggesting.
Let's see, just to clarify, employees file with unemployment benefits, employer will get the letter from the government, and the employer will check standby temp layoff, send back to the government. Right, so the process is, in one of files for unemployment on standby basis, that starts the process. The employer will will get notification back from Employment Security to confirm standby, and it's important that the employer confirm that because that basically extends the benefits that are available to that employee from 4 weeks to 8 weeks.
Assuming it is a standby and you're not actually terminating them, but yeah.
But that confirmation by the employer does not delay employee collecting their benefits.
Correct.
That happens simultaneously.
Like, so currently if someone filed an unemployment claim and then you as an employer defended against it and it was denied, they owe the government all the money they've been taking as for unemployment because they've been receiving it while the claim was pending. So they're getting their money while their claim is pending.
I mean, the long and short of it is the government, both at the federal level and the state level, has streamlined the process to get benefits in the hands of employees that find themselves temporarily out of work.
Yeah. Can I apply for unemployment as the owner of a practice? I've been paying unemployment taxes on myself as the owner because presumably you're an S corp and giving myself payroll salary, and unemployment taxes have been paid for 1.5 years. It depends on if you exempted yourself from employment security when you set it up.
Sounds like though he's been.
But if you've been paying it
for the employees.
for the employee,
Yeah.
that's different than you yourself getting it. They're separate questions.
Okay, question about a written notice from the employer that the employees are being put on standby.
You can, I'm an attorney, so not putting things in writing is better than doing it, but I would make it clear to them in some way that you're not being fired, that I'm laying people off. If you want to put it in writing, that's fine, but you should encourage them to file for unemployment, and then you'll check the box. So as long as it's pretty benign, you're being laid off on standby notice pending the resolution of Corona, that's generally fine.
Okay, what if an employee is hired prospectively but hasn't started yet? DA who's accepted a position and then the office shuts down. That's a good question. When are they technically your employee? First day of employment?
Generally, it's the first day of employment.
So technically they're not your employee yet?
I would let anyone who's waiting to start give them notice that you're not going to be able to hire them at this time.
Let's see this. Oh, the sound quality is poor, please. Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, if anybody can't hear it all, just give us a quick heads up. Again, another question about can owners of S corps receive unemployment only if they've been opted into the system and been paying the unemployment taxes on themselves in addition to their employees.
So you have to go back and see if you opted into the system when you made your S election and when you started doing your payroll. So go talk, if you use Paylocity, Paychecks, ADR, ask them if they opted you into the system.
Question, where can an employee get application for unemployment benefits? Val, on that email broadcast I forwarded to you, there's some website links that for employment security. If you could share that, they could drill down through that link and find information on how to apply for unemployment benefits.
Great. Yeah, just for everyone's knowledge, we are recording this. After the meeting's over, I'll be sharing an email blast with you all with the recording and with what Brian has just mentioned, that document.
Yeah, we have a few links for supplemental documents.
Until the government forces you to shut down, a layoff is occurring because it's not safe for your patients in all business, and you're shutting down the business for non-governmental reasons. So they can file for unemployment regardless of if it's a government mandate. That's a long one.
Hang on, don't scroll that one up yet. So to summarize, have employees apply for standby. If we decide then to pay them PTO per our policy, then do it as well, it's not technically a bonus, it's just a payout. It's for,
PTO is already.
it's for compensation already earned, so there's no worked hours associated with it, which is important when reporting it through payroll, because compensation for worked hours is what, you know, post-unemployment is what the employment security uses in calculating benefits.
And if you've laid someone off, you are still paying their insurance premiums for them, so they should still have health insurance.
Are we done with that?
Yes. If we have an employee that has symptoms and are thinking they will qualify for more different forms of unemployment if they have an actual diagnosis of COVID-19, will they? And if they test positive, is it likely to put the business in jeopardy of shutdown and affecting future? If you have an employee who, I don't know, I don't know what thinking you will qualify having a diagnosis of COVID-19 means exactly, but if you have an employee who has reason to believe that they've been exposed to COVID-19 or is or currently testing positive for it or seeking a diagnosis of it, that they need to go home right away, and you need to inform the other employees that there's been an exposure.
And send notice to every patient that was in contact with them.
So I'm not sure. I don't quite understand that question.
Yeah, employment security, and this is part of the drill down when you get the information from Val, is published by Employment Security. And I think the question was, is there different avenues for benefits if you have a worker that is confirmed COVID or suspected COVID? And the answer to that is yes. It depends on maybe the severity of the case as well. So, you know, for a confirmed COVID case, they're going to qualify for, you know, the Washington State paid sick leave if they have any accrued benefits there. Depending on the severity, they're going to also qualify for unemployment benefits or also benefits under the Washington State Paid Family Medical Leave Act. They want us to read the question as we.
Oh, okay. Okay, so someone has a very specific question. So to summarize, have employees apply for standby layoff status. If we decide to pay them PTO per our policies, then do it as a, so hold on, sorry, it's just, if everyone could stop writing, like.
Just read them.
Yeah.
So the question is, so to summarize, have employees pay for standby/layoff status. If we decide to pay them PTO per our policy, then do it as a bonus, gross amount and not hourly. We can still keep them on a limited basis if needed and pay them hourly without it affecting their unemployment. When we open back up, then they stop the unemployment status of standby. During this time, we can hold it still. During this time, we continue paying their medical benefits as is, with them contributing their portions per out-of-pocket, their portions per our policy manual. For example, if the company pays 25%, and they pay the difference, or vice versa. State mandated sick leave, and they have been accruing at 1 hour. Well, they wouldn't be accruing any more mandated sick leave because they're not working any hours. So just for the temporary hours that they would come in during their standby period, that certainly would calculate into that 1 hour per 40 hours work accrual. Good question about how would they pay their portion of the medical insurance?
A lot of this you should fire off to your payroll provider, but so I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that, but Your question is largely correct. The only caveat I would say is that, you know, there is an 8-week clock on layoff by standby layoff. So it doesn't go on forever. And then the one thing I would say is, you know, if they're coming back in for a Friday, you know, maybe a patient's experiencing pain, they need an emergency, something or other, and they come in and they work a little bit, that money that you pay them will affect their unemployment a little bit, but it's not going to kick them out of unemployment. I know there's probably going to be a lot of questions on unemployment and my number, and you're more than welcome to call us, but it might be helpful if we talk about some other things.
Hold on right there, Ken. Should employees that have children out of school wait on filing for unemployment to keep themselves eligible for FMLA? Keep in mind, Tyler mentioned earlier, if the office closes and lays off the entire crew on a standby basis, FMLA is put on hold. Those employees don't qualify for FMLA until the off standby back on the payroll. Correct?
That's exactly right. Think of it this way. FMLA follows employment. If someone is laid off, they are not employed by you anymore, and so they are no longer eligible for FMLA. There's a lot of confusion out there because employment laws attorneys would tell you that it's really scary to fire someone who's on FMLA, but this is strange times, and we're in a place now where, you know, there's just going to be global layoffs, potentially for whole offices. So FMLA doesn't apply if they are laid off.
Just to touch on Dr. Chang's comment, this is just a Q&A session, so this isn't a formal presentation. We put this together last minute with Valerie, so feel free to just keep asking questions for the next 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. And if you have any outstanding questions after you read the links in the email, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, literally, in between doing tax returns and dealing with tax season, we slammed this together as best we could. Scroll up some.
And I have a team of people at my office who are helping me, so feel free to give me a call if you have any questions.
So is there a separate separation?
There's a separate service form that we can use to lay off. No such thing exists, like, by virtue of the government. Your HR company may have a preferred form that they like you to use, but just telling someone you've been laid off is generally sufficient.
Go back up.
And you will confirm their layoff status when you confirm with when Employment Security sends you that form to confirm their layoff status and standby status.
If someone doesn't live in Washington and I don't know why you're paying unemployment on them if they don't live in Washington, but they need to apply for unemployment in the state they live in. So if you have a practice in Vancouver right on the border and you have some folks that live in Portland, they need to apply with Oregon.
So it looks like we got just a notification from Dr. Guak coming in, just in from WSDA. Very shortly, dental offices across the state will be receiving guidance from the Department of Health to postpone all elective. Well, I guess we were expecting this. Just Tyler and I were curious talking earlier why it was taking them so long. I guess you could speak to maybe the legal liability issue of if we get a kind of mandate from ADA and what's going on in other states and now Washington State Department of Health, what kind of liability risk do offices have by keeping open?
Historically, as litigious as the United States is, we've never really allowed plaintiffs to have victory, for saying you got me sick, you gave me a cough. That doesn't really apply in the doctor or patient setting. You need to establish protocols now. This is the new world order that we live in. So if you are looking forward to the 6 months or hopefully less or whenever this, I'm not going to say blows over, but when we start returning back to normal, one thing that all practices are likely going to have in place is something like a COVID-19 policy. I've been giving them out to some of my larger group practices and DSOs. And it's a policy in place that governs exactly what the employer is going to do in the event some of these more serious strains of flu start occurring in their practice. That's going to become the standard of care that professionals like yourselves are going to have to honor. And so by not having that in place, you expose yourself to liability. So that's something that, it's a little late now, but it's something that we look forward to a world where maybe coronavirus is largely under control and there's just a few people out and about, maybe possibly causing issues. Having a policy like that in place will severely limit your liability. But I have a lot of doctors, well, I don't have a lot, but I'm hearing stories of doctors who are refusing to close their practices and things like that. If you're taking that stance against what the ADA is recommending, now what the Washington State Dental Association is recommending, you're falling below the standard of care for a medical practitioner. And I think you have DQAC issues at that point and possible liability issues if someone gets sick while they come into your office. The policy is for employees of the practice. It's the rules governing what happens if you feel sick or someone in the practice is exposed to any kind of aggressive flu strain. And we've been working those up and getting those out to some of our larger group practices as they look forward, in other parts of the country where it's not running so rampant.
Next question, does an employee need to use sick and vacation time accrued before filing for unemployment?
No.
Would you recommend using PTO or giving them some extra PTO before filing for unemployment? Presumably the question is from a tone of trying to help your employee get through this financial crunch with less than full paychecks. That's completely up to you. I mean, as a business owner, you could go to your employees and say, hey, you've been doing a great job for the last 6 months, 12 months. I'm going to give you all 40 hours of additional PTO, and then turn around and pay it out to them. Or it doesn't even have to be PTO. You can just pay them a bonus for past services. Been doing a great job. I'm going to write a bonus to you right now. And then go file for unemployment. So these have been scrolling in pretty fast. Have we missed some, Kev?
This maternity leave one is interesting.
You should call me and we can talk about that. That's a very specific question and I don't want to give an answer.
Well, presumably that's paid maternity leave or unpaid maternity leave?
You can't punish someone or lay them off because they are on maternity leave. But if you are laying them off for reasons unrelated to maternity leave, it should be fine. However, you should talk to your attorney about it before you do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a high-risk situation, and you need to make sure you handle it correctly.
Let's see, is that a policy? Not quite sure what that question is. Is that a policy for patients or employees?
That's a policy for employees because I think the standard of care that doctors are going to have to provide in their practices, one of those items is going to be having, just like you may have a sterilization policy with your employees, having another policy that governs, hey, if you've been exposed to COVID-19 or a similar airborne illness, these are the steps you need to take to inform me. These are how I'll help you. And having this policy in place is going to become part of the standard of care, just like having a sterilization policy, just like having expectations on how associate dentists are charting, just like any other policy you have in the practice. And by not having a policy like that, I suspect you'll likely be falling below the standard of care in a post-COVID-19 world.
Yeah, so in plain English, be very mindful of not closing your office, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you be willing to share resources that we have compiled through our practices?
Give me a call and we can talk if you have any questions.
Send money.
No, it's not that. Some of the larger practices don't necessarily fit the smaller practices, but I'm happy to help and I recognize the times and I like working with dentists. So just give me a call and I'm happy to chat about it.
Will the Department of Health define what an essential dental procedure is, or is at our discretion? Well, what I've seen from ADA is pretty limited, isn't it?
I thought the ADA, if I recall correctly, was pain or, and I don't have the announcement from me, but it's going to affect their mouth if you don't treat it now within the next 3 to 6 months. So you couldn't put watch on the file. they're probably never gonna, like all non-government bodies, the ADA and all of them, they're concerned with their own liability, so I would doubt that they would ever, create a list of procedures
Right.
that you must treat now versus not. They're gonna leave that discretion up to you. That's both a sword and a shield, but I think the general guidance is if the patient is in pain, you can treat, or if it's gonna affect their oral health immediately in the next 3 to 6 months, it's okay to treat. Yeah, what Dr. Foster just wrote, I think is consistent with what I just said. I'm not sure where he got that, if that's from the WSDA or not.
I did a draw to help them financially, hoping that staff can file now for standby unemployment benefits.
It's in advance.
A draw, okay, so like Marina's commenting, you presume that's in a payroll advance?
Yeah, so a draw doesn't really apply necessarily to employees. What you're probably talking about is an advance on future salary. And so that's an appropriate way to do that. So it's not earned yet. You're assuming that it's going to be earned in the future. And so then, yes, it doesn't play against unemployment benefits. They can still apply for unemployment benefits.
HR 6201 is specific to the FMLA. It is an expansion of the FMLA rules. It does not directly relate to the closure of an office or the quarantine. I mean, it deals with those, but if your office is fully closed and you have no employees and they're all laid off, you're probably not in an FMLA situation any longer.
So Dr. Foster saying that, what, you already commented on that?
Yeah.
Dental care related, they want us to,
I think I talked to.
they want us to read it.
Oh, sorry.
So dental care related to the relief of pain and management of infection should continue to keep patients out of our state's hospitals and emergency departments. That is from WSDA. So that's what Tyler was commenting about, what's essential or emergency care. That's the standard that you said you thought you saw at the ADA site.
And if that's a little bit different, but I see the spirit of it, is they're looking to keep people out of our hospitals who otherwise would need to go there. And if you can stop that from happening, I don't think you would be wrong to treat them.
Did you see Dr.? Okay, a dental assistant, we gave her 2 weeks notice last week to take a new position at a new office. Would we owe her unemployment benefits if her new position falls through for the time being, or can we let her go on her given last day next week?
Most likely, yes. But distinguish, most likely yes, but you should talk to your attorney or your HR person for more specific guidance.
Val, can you confirm that you heard our last comment, because the remote speaker batteries were fading?
Yeah, no, we're getting a lot of static, you guys, and when you move it, it goes muffled, so you might want to repeat that again.
Okay, let's go back to that last question. Can you hear us okay, Val?
Yes, I can.
Okay, a dental assistant, we gave 2 weeks notice last week. Will she be entitled to unemployment benefits if her new position falls through for the time being, or can we let her go on her given last day next week? And Tyler said,
most likely yes, but you should check with your attorney or HR provider first to make sure.
would it be best to lay off everyone, or can I keep a couple of employees to keep the lights on, answer phones, etc.? Well,
Third-party answering services.
standby unemployment is that for the entire crew, or employee by employee? One by one.
One by one. You don't lay off your whole workforce. Every person gets a layoff.
So I guess the answer to that is yes. You could put, say, all of your employees on standby except one or two, and keep them working.
You just can't be discriminatory in how you place them on standby. So you need to do it on a neutral basis based off objective needs of the practice.
What about new patients? If a non-established patient is in pain, can we opt not to see them? How do dental offices limit COVID-19 exposure?
If a patient who you've never had contact with leaves a voice message for you saying, oh, I chipped a tooth and I need a crown, it hurts really bad, you do not have a patient-doctor relationship with them, and so your exposure for not treating them is limited. You should, however, call them back and try and get them to a hospital or somewhere where they may be able to be treated if you don't want to do that treatment. But if you have a new patient, you can treat them as long as it's within the ADA and WSDA standards.
Do we do anything with accrued sick leave and sick leave that's been rolled over from last year? Well, it depends on your policy. Like, our policy here is our sick leave that's accrued per the Washington State mandate is a subset of paid time off. So employees have it available to use for personal days, additional vacation days, and sick days. So it kind of depends on your policy, because if your policy limits it to actual sick leave, then it just sits in their accrual bucket, so to say. Can someone please answer if it's okay to cement permanent crowns? So a question came up a little bit earlier. Can you scroll up a little bit, Kev? How far? Not very far. Right. Right there. A little more. Where to go?
What was the question about?
Something about pay.
That's right here.
So the question was, if someone's got a temporary, can they come in to have the permanent cemented under the closure and the recommendation of, sounds like the Department of Health and WSDA to forego non-essential or emergency care. The question was, is cementing a permanent crown an elective treatment?
If you think the crown won't last in the ordinary course of that patient's activities for the next 3 to 6 months, you probably could bring them in to finish it. But the question should be less about, can I do this, and more about, how am I doing this? Am I bringing in staff? Am I going to have that patient have their temperature checked before they come into my practice? Am I going to do it all alone? Am I going to bring in an assistant to help me? And, balance those exposure risks versus the patient's health in that situation. You're butting up on my limits of dentistry. I don't know how long a temp crown can last for.
As an employee of a dental...
The 3 to 6 month time frame is from the CDA or the ADA, I believe, as of last night, I believe.
As an employee of a dental corporation, if we take leave of absence, can we still file for unemployment?
You're no longer on a leave of absence. You've essentially, you can't file for unemployment if you quit, so they need to term you or lay you off, but you can't be on a leave of absence and then file for unemployment. Your leave of absence is just you not getting paid.
Are salaried employees able to claim standby or temporary unemployment? Yes. What if your employer wants to take a forced vacation and use PTO? Is that kind of directed by your employee manual?
That's an employee manual question.
Let's see. What's your take on patients needing SRP or perio maintenance? Well, I'm still seeing those patients in my garage on the weekend, so.
Yeah, we moonlight on the side.
Yeah, you're getting into kind of the technicality of dentistry that's over our heads.
So let's touch on a couple more questions here, and then Valerie, people can just follow up with us after, and we'll email out the links. Does that sound fair?
Well,
I
we're
think that's-
okay to keep going as long as we got questions.
Does anyone have any questions that are unrelated to like what we've spent the majority of our time talking about, like unemployment? Does anyone have any questions about cash flow management, triaging your cash flow, lenders, leases, other constraints on your practices right now?
Scroll up a little bit, Kevin.
Well, we're on these questions.
Sorry, I'm
Dr. Kirk, any guidance on seeing a patient for urgent care who is also symptomatic? Current guidance for other healthcare offices, as I understand, is that office isn't equipped with appropriate PPE, then refer elsewhere. Yes, if you do not have the bandwidth or capabilities to properly handle that patient, then you need to refer them to a hospital immediately. You shouldn't, it's like picking up a porcupine. Why would you do that?
So a question here about medical benefits. Still not sure about their medical benefits if they are on layoff. They still need to cover their full amount despite their 20% participation. Yeah, we
Treat it as an advance and then take it out of
we
salary later.
kind of left that kind of unanswered earlier. That's kind of more of a mechanical issue. It's similar to COBRA, or COBRA-like arrangements. If you have an employee that is left employment and being put on standby as leaving employment, how you recover their 20% contribution is just a mechanical issue with you. They either have to write you a check, or you, like Marina said, you put it as a payroll advance and figure out a way for them to pay it back after things get back to normal.
Once you scroll down, I see people have questions that. You do stop accruing sick and vacation pay during layoff.
There's been questions about applying for unemployment, whether you have to go to. So, there's questions about how to apply for unemployment, or if you have to go to an employment security department office. I believe it's all online.
It is all online.
Yeah,
You don't have
it's
to
all
wait.
online.
Someone asked about SBA loans. Before you go down the SBA rabbit hole, you should contact the lender who gave you your practice loan and see if they have any immediately available lines of credit. The banks are also getting financial resources from the government to help keep small businesses afloat. SBA loans are a good opportunity, but they have a long lead time and they are really onerous to get into.
Agreed. Long lead time and lots of paperwork. Payroll tax relief.
The FMLA rules have relief baked into them for payroll taxes, but I think the conclusion here is most doctors are probably not going to find themselves in an FMLA world in the immediate future. And I'm not aware of any ongoing payroll tax relief.
No, we haven't seen any payroll tax relief on the federal level or state level. The only relief on the state level that I've seen so far is if an owner of a business or a clinic has suffered from COVID, in the sense of, the owner of the business had a case of COVID, or the business was shut down because of an internal COVID infection, they're granting relief on late filing and late paying, but no complete wipeout of payroll tax liability.
Any strategy for paying red envelope bills? The best thing I can say right now is have a dialogue with your vendors and APs. And in my experience right now, other than a handful of landlords, most people are pretty understanding, especially in the dental industry.
Taking on credit lines and evaluating Washington Lifelines. I know they are giving some resources. It's worthwhile to, okay. Like Tyler said, check first with your current banking relationship. I think you mentioned that most doctors don't apply for unemployment when you have paid yourself a W-2 of your office. What we have referred to is most practice owners, and this would be situations where they are either employed by an S corporation or just a corporate entity in general, and are paid as a W-2 employee. Most officers / owners of the business have opted out of the unemployment system, and so they would not qualify for benefits.
I don't think there's a cut and dry answer on whether it's better to dip into savings or take out a loan. There's some pretty interesting interest rates out there right now, but I think it's on a case-by-case basis. I don't think that there's a bright line answer there.
Right. I mean, maintain some type of emergency savings.
I think the question becomes, what are you able to triage with your creditors? Can you get some relief from your equipment people? Can you get some relief from your landlord with your force majeure clause? One thing we haven't talked about is everyone should call their insurance carrier and see if they have a business, they're called business interruption insurance or business continuity insurance. And, you know, up until last week, the insurance companies were not honoring those riders, but because of the government mandates, what we've gotten in the last week from ADA, WSDA, they may be changing their tunes and may be able to pick up some of the overhead. Since you guys bought your practices, you've been paying on these insurance policies, so you should at least tender a claim and see if they'll pick it up. That's business interruption insurance or business continuity insurance. And you just, you know, not everyone has it, but most doctors do, and you should see if your carrier will pick up some of your practice overhead during this time with that insurance. It won't be a lot, but it'll be something.
Yeah, I see there's another question on that point. And the question is, you know, a doc has checked their insurance carrier in that regard, and Tyler's absolutely right. There's a lot of pressure from the federal government for vendors like, you know, insurance carriers to have a more liberal interpretation of what would be considered business interruption or any kind of continuation of normal operations.
Yeah, I mean, up until last week, the insurance companies were saying no because your business interruption is self-induced because you're making decisions kind of prophylactically. But in the last week, we've gotten the Governor Inslee statement, declaration, President Trump's, the ADA, now the WSDA. So they may be forced to change their tune on if what is harming your business is actually being done prophylactically as opposed to is actually happening to you.
So here's another question on health insurance benefits where employees pay a portion. If they don't have a paycheck, how's the owner of the practice going to recoup that portion from the employee? Seems to me that's just a mechanical, right?
Just an advance, you may not if they never come back to work.
It's an advance, or why couldn't the employer require the employee to cut a check for their share?
I would have to look into that. That likely could be right, but we're in strange times. I've never had this happen.
Now, I know for under the unemployment program, for not the standby unemployment, but the shared work program, where basically employment security gives employees a benefit subsidy in the case where the employees continue to work part-time hours or less than their full schedule. Under that program, the employer is required to continue all benefits, you know, on the same program that they were paying before a reduced work situation. But we're talking about a complete layoff, a standby. And so I really think it's just a mechanical issue of either advancing treating the employee portion as an advance and you recoup it later, or requiring those employees to pay that portion by, you know, paying money back to the practice.
I think the questions are slowing down.
Yeah, it'd probably be a good time to wrap up. Valerie, you there?
Yep, I'm here, guys. So,
Is
okay.
there anything?
Yeah, well, I want to thank you all again for putting this all together for us very, very quickly. So everyone that's on this, please, we are recording it. We will be sending it out afterwards, along with some helpful links that the dental accounting pros have given us. So please don't call us. We will get this information to you once it's vetted. From the accounting pros. We so appreciate everybody. Yes, I will be putting this on Facebook. Yes, I will be sharing all this information that they have so graciously gifted us and done this for us complimentary today. So again, thank you guys. These are preferred providers of the Washington AGD. They've provided their email contact information. We've got some telephone numbers, so please reach out to them directly. And everyone stay healthy. We appreciate you all. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
And ladies.
Hunker down and muscle through it.
We'll weather the storm together.
Absolutely. We're in
Thanks,
it all
everyone.
together, for sure. All right. I'm going to stop
All
recording
right.
and end our meeting. Thank you all.
All right.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for having us.